Welcome back to another episode of On Coaching with Magness and Marcus. I'm Steve Magness, Deputy Director of High Performance West, joined as always by my good friend and colleague John Marcus, Director of High Performance West. John, it is 2018.
Oh, we're here to give the people what they want for every day of 2018. And what I mean by that is you got to go to highperformancewest.com. Yeah, we sponsor ourselves. I've been sponsoring myself since 1983, August 1st. And there you can get the workout of the day. That's every day. And a blog post. And more goodies coming. So, again, check it out. We sponsor ourselves. I hope you do too. And I'm very excited for what 2018 is going to bring for not only myself, not only Steve, not only the athletes you work with, but also you, as well as the new High Performance West.
Only the cool kids sponsor themselves.
That's true. You're not cool unless you sponsor yourself.
That's right. Get it done. Don't rely on others. That's what we're doing.
I mean,
here.
We gotta, eat what you preach, right? So it's resiliency, self-reliance, autonomy, like those matter. So for everybody who has been coming, thank you. Thank you. It's been exciting to see so many people reach out. It's been exciting to see so many people be like, yeah, I read that workout. That was mind-boggling. Or, oh, man, that helped me think a little bit more deeply and more critically about what I'm doing or what I'm asking athletes I'm coaching doing. So, man, it matters. It's important. And to all my day one people who came out of the woodwork and he said, I mean, not just, who came out of the woodwork and were like, oh, hey, give me something for free, but the notes that people sent, the thank yous, the hey, I've been listening to you guys since day one. This is how I've grown and changed. Like that to me is worth more than, all the Bitcoin in the world. So thank you.
Dang, that's you're bringing Bitcoin into our podcast. We must be hitting, hype cycle right now.
You can't be tone deaf, man. Cryptocurrency, it's here now.
That'll be a future episode. How to master your cryptocurrency game.
Yeah, so, by the time we probably do it, cryptocurrency will be out of vogue, but, that's neither here nor there.
It's all good. See, we cover everything on this podcast. You think it was just running and coaching, but no, it's life. So, speaking about everything.
Everything, yes.
Everything. This is an everything podcast. An everything about the 5K podcast.
Yes, so, you name it. It has to do with the 5K. We're talking about it today. Everything.
All right. Well, we've set ourselves up for, either a really long one or, failing to cover everything. So,
buckle up, man. We're gonna go for a ride.
All right. Let's jump right in. Where do you want to start?
How about the 5K is the hardest event on the track? The hardest event.
That's a bold claim.
That's my interpretation. Steve, where do you sit with that?
That's a bold claim. The 5K is one of my favorite events to coach, actually.
It's one of my least favorites. So good. We can actually, I'm like, oh, you want to be a 5K? Ooh. All right. You know what you're signing up for. Are you sure?
There you go. So I love it because it has this unique combination of endurance and speed, I mean, I guess every event has its own little combination, but you got to be pretty darn fast, but you have to have the aerobic strength of an animal, to pull it off. So as an athlete, I probably would have been right in there and said that it's the hardest one to race because I sucked at it and hated it. And maybe that has to do with my 5K PR coming from a 5K at LSU. So you can
of all places
that there was no Stanford magic there. It was
it was good old Bayou magic.
The Bayou magic, that's right. So I'm gonna need a conversion on my 5K because of that. But,
yeah, let's see if the NCAA has a Bayou conversion 5K time. That would be
that's my hope. But it's tough to run. I think it's tough to run because it hurts a lot, almost like a middle distance event, but you have that long period of uncertainty and doubt as you circle the track for 12 and a half laps.
Yeah, it's you're redlining for 13 to 20 minutes, depending on how long it takes you to get around the track for the 5K. I mean, you're redlining the entire time. And the reason it's so tough is it doesn't matter how fit you are. That is the game. That is what you're signing up for when you are running a real 5K. This excludes, obviously, championship 5Ks at the end of a conference meet where they just throw everybody in because everybody's exhausted, steeplechasers, 1,500-meter runners, and coaches are trying to secure as many points in a last-minute effort as possible. But, if you're running a legitimate, honest 5K, it is tough, and that is the ask of you, is the entire 3 miles of the event is at your red line, and how long can you go and sustain. I remember speaking with Chris Slinsky on a run once about his, magic summer of, I believe 2010, when, he ran some of the fastest 5Ks of all time, like 3 times under sub 13 in, some of the top 5Ks ever by an American distance runner. And this is when he broke 27 for the 10. And I was like, slow, man, tell me a little bit about the 5s, like which one was easiest. And he just stopped me right there. So, Jamar, they were never easy. None of those 5s. I was hurting after 200 meters every time. And so, that was a point of clarification for me when, you had Selinsky here saying, hey, I've never been in that much pain or discomfort in the hurt locker, as he called it, for any given amount of time in any race, save a 5. And it didn't matter that I was in maybe one of the best fitnesses and forms of any American distance runner ever. He couldn't escape it. So I remember, talking to Adam Gatzer about it too, and he said a very similar thing. And he's like, it's the manliest man's event. He was taking very, adopted a posture that is very, dominant and strong. And that's just the way he framed it, because we were just, talking as we do locker room talk. But it was just like the manliest man's event. Like, you got to really have the cojones if you want to be able to race this event at the highest level, your highest level, effectively. And so when I see all these, couch to 5K programs, in my mind, I'm just like, couch to red line programs. Like, oof, that is like, oof, man. I'm always amazed and inspired by people that complete those types of programs, because real 5Ks are real hard running. Even when you're doing workouts, you say, oh, we're going to just do something easy at 5K pace. No such thing. No such thing. Like, I see people do, oh, you know, a 5K pace workout? Whoa. Good luck with that. That one's going to be honest. And that's, I think, a point of respect I have for the event as well. Not to say I dislike it. It's just, man, it takes a certain type of bird to really thrive in that event.
Yeah, well, there's no settling, right? In the longer events, you can kind of...
You can get in, get a rhythm,
yeah.
Like a 10, even in cross a little bit, like 8Ks or something. You can kind of get out, establish a rhythm, and then start to put in the foot on the gas. But, to quote Mike Smith, this is foot at the punch in the foot, the pedal to the metal, all the way down the entire way.
Yeah, it's interesting because I wonder how many people actually do that.
That's really the event, though. I think sometimes we forget that.
Right. No, I think that's the event, but I think what happens, especially in the U.S. system, is like you come from the mile up, right? And your perception is that like the 5K is a distance event, so like you bring in this mindset of like settling, and if you look at how high schoolers run the 5K, right, it's like out crazy hard, second mile kind of sucks, bring it home the last one, right? And I think that's because like they haven't learned how to race it.
Yeah, if you're settling at any point in a 5K, you're doing it wrong. Period. End of story. And so then that brings up the question, Steve, how to race a 5K effectively.
Oh man, you can't.
Well, you can. So some people like to play the efficient game, right? Oh, I want you to run even split game. That's the game they play. They say that we're going to show up to the track, and today's game is run the splits at this. And we go to Perfect Weather in Palo Alto every year, as college and even post-collegiate coaches and professional coaches. We all cater to this concept of you're going to run even splits at Stanford. and it's going to be awesome. And it's just, yeah, you're just going to go. I've rarely seen that. And because the reality is you hit a lactate, threshold very quickly in the 5. I think, it's about a mile, 2K in. So the first 2K, yeah, it's kind of free. But then you have, if you're a male, you have 9 minutes of running. If you're a female, you have about 9.5, like 10.5 minutes of running for that final 3K, where you're right on the edge of your lactic threshold, where acidosis is being buffered at, you hope, a rate at which it can use, itself as fuel and not create the what people call lactic acid, but the acidosis effect, where those H ions turn the muscle cells off, and then you feel like you're running in quicksand, or you feel like you hit a wall, and it happens. You're like, go watch any Stanford 5K, Peyton Jordan 5K. The pack is like there, they're looking good, it's big, it's all together, about 2K in, and then even like for the first section it's about 3K, and then all of a sudden they go a lap. And after 3K, it's like, whoa, what happened to that pack? What? I mean, someone didn't drop the hammer. The pace stayed pretty much similar. But what happened was people just fell off a cliff of acidosis. They were like, oh, I'm on my threshold. And that's what we mean by redlining. You're redlining on that threshold. Can your body physiologically keep up with this buffering of lactate to use it as fuel rather than to have it be a source of toxins that's going to impede your progress? And man, I just always like to just get a bucket of popcorn and just stand at like the top of the second curve by the steeplechase pit at Stanford for those 5Ks. I wait till after those 3Ks, because it's like all of a sudden it looks nice and fluid. It's a big pack, and then carnage, lots and lots of carnage. And it's like, wow. And I really respect that, because these are still men and women who have showed up and are, again, seeking a fast mark, seeking a PR, a record of some sort. But they're fighting. It's a heavyweight boxing bout, round, 16 for the next 5 laps, because they're just swimming in a sea of acidosis.
Yeah, the thing I love about it is it becomes just kind of a survival mode after 3K. And like you're trying, it's the game I play with the 5K is get to like 600 to go, right? Because then you can fake your way through almost anything.
Yeah.
And it's like, can you get close enough, feeling just good enough that you can convince yourself you're almost done and can kick, And with actually with the one female I coached in the 5K, who was world class, like that was the name of the game. Our whole strategy revolved around getting to like 800 to go, and if we could get to 800 to go, we knew we were good. So like her instructions were like, hey, find that red line where you're like grinding it, pushing it, but that you can make it to 800 to go, and if you're pushing over that, then like it's not going to go well. And I think that's the trick on the 5K. And racing it is like really figuring out where your individual red line is, and like, are you the type that rides it until you can't, then you blow up? Or are you the type that like rides it for a while, and if you sense you're not going to make it, like you have a slightly slower lap or two in there?
Right. Think about the mile. It's a really extended version of the mile. For the mile, you only see that little lull for one lap, right? You go 2 laps. That third lap, there's the third lap lull, and then the big kick. 9 times out of 10, we see the third mile lull, right? And then the big kick, the last 2. So it's just teasing out the duration of discomfort and the duration of tolerance that you need to have built up from the mile. And it makes sense. It's 3 times almost roughly. Like, all right, it's 3 times the distance. So the duration of discomfort, or the duration that you're in that red line or that hurt locker, or however you want to describe it, is instead of 1 lap, 4. and man, there's a lot of mind games. There's a lot of self-talk that goes into those 4 laps those final 4 laps of a 5. And that to me is where it is the most unique coaching challenge, because you can physiologically have someone ready to go and feel like they're in the best effort or shape of their life to give the best effort, and you feel like all the physiological ecosystem interaction and exchange is really, at a high level of repute, and it can do it. But then they're just mentally not callous. They're mentally not ready for the reality is going to face in that last 4 to 5 minutes of running at a good hard rhythm. And that's another reason the wheels fall off. So it's not, and I've seen coaches like, I don't get it. They were crushing workouts, all the races leading up to this. Like, they ran a good 10, they ran a good mile, they ran this, and everything that indicated that they're quote unquote ready to go. But, it's a deep dark space that you kind of have to go confront when you go race that 5.
Yeah, my favorite story time, my favorite 5K blow up I've seen in my college kids was we had a kid who was he was an 8:23K guy indoors trying to run like 14:40, 14:35 outdoors in a meet in Houston. He was dead on 14:40 pace, led a bunch of it until 600 to go, and then dropped like a 90-second 400.
Ooh,
and it was the greatest example of like he rode that line for as long as he could, and then it was just legs out, done. Yeah. And it wasn't like motivation, it wasn't fitness, like it was just on that day in that space, like when it was done, it was done.
Yeah. And it's tough because there's no coming back. Like once you fall off that edge, it's over. It's done. You can't. There's no second wind. You can't rally. It was funny. I was reading Run again, just kind of looking through it through the language of training in the back appendix of it, and it had underneath this glossary of terms, basic training terms, it had quote unquote second wind, and it was like, I believe the definition was akin to something novice runners experience, but the well-conditioned runner is not privy to. And I was like, yeah, that's about right. Like, if you're well-conditioned, there's no second wind. And anytime I hear someone say, oh, yeah, well, we're getting through the first 3K or first 2 miles and then of the 5K, and then we're going to get the second wind, and, then you're going to get after it. It's like, oof, that's setting someone up for failure, because you're right. When it's done, it's done.
Yeah, no, there's no coming out of it. It's that's kind of the beauty of it. It's like you never know as a coach when you're watching until you get through it.
It's the most anxious coaching I have.
Because it's just
like a 10.
Yeah, it's a waiting game, right? You're waiting and you're looking at signs and you're like, all right, are they gonna make it this next lap? Especially in those races where it's just like, roll with the pack, hang on, and see if you can make it, right?
Yeah, and that's what you don't know. It's lap by lap. After you get through the halfway part, they can look great. I've heard, and I myself have coached people down there at Stanford or other places. Oh, you look great, awesome job. Just giving all the encouragement in the world, and then all of a sudden it's like, whoa, what happened? They just got gapped by like 15 meters. The front pack didn't speed up. But now they're not in contact anymore, and you shake your head. You're like, what happened? This was less than 90 seconds that they were there. They looked great, and they, were composed and engaged and locked in, and now they're just out the back.
Yeah, one of the things I always suggest as coaches, if you go to that meet, is just watch it, or just watch it online. It's harder, but watch the tail end of the top pack, right? Mm-hmm. And just watch how people look. And, like, when that breaking point comes, and it's like, like you see it in people's form, you see it in their running, they go from, like, super smooth to, like, oh, gosh, like, what happened? And, it's always an interesting phenomenon to watch, because it gives you appreciation for, like, the rigors of the event.
Yeah, I mean, it's science in biochemistry and physiology in real time in front of your eyes. That's what I think it's kind of cool. Everyone's like, oh yeah, let's talk about the lab. Like, no, just go watch a 5K. If you want to see lactic threshold, at its, purest and rawest and most, expressive form, go watch a good hard 5K ran at any one of these time trial meets, or even, I mean, even the, nowadays, like with the women in the World Championships and Olympics, like with the way they're running the 5K at that world stage, where they're gunning hard from first step, right? Or, I mean, you can watch Prefontaine's 1972 Olympic final. I mean, what happened was he went for it, blood and guts, like ran all out, like, in that last 150 meters, right? He had himself a medal, but because he went for gold, he faded hard to fourth. And it was probably a little apathy because he didn't get his mark of winning a gold medal, but also too, like he just physiologically was bankrupt, and Ian Stewart just, sniped him at the end. But that's, when you're training someone for the 5K, that tolerance training, whether it's physiological tolerance and or mental tolerance, those two things must be top of mind when preparing someone to run a series or even a one-off of competent competitive 5Ks. So it's amazingly critical.
So let's get into that, the training side, because I think that is, I think the other piece of it is on that training side there is like you can go from having all the capacity to do it, but not have like the mental physiological ability to like, tolerate stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And you could see a big drop, right? Someone can be ready, a woman can be ready to run 15:20. But if she hasn't done like that final piece of the puzzle, then she's gonna die and fall off to 15:40.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right?
No. Yeah. All right. Where do you want to start? I mean, there's a lot of ground to cover with everything about 5K training.
I know there's a lot. Let's just start with how you approach it. Like, what's the mindset? What's the principle behind it?
So the mindset is I always get everyone you're going into a prize fights match. Like you're going to take punches and you're going to throw punches. You're not going to come out of this unscathed, right? So I try to adopt a boxing posture because I think it sets the right tone of like, look, it's going to be hard. I'm in it to go the full 16, right? You're not going to win by knockout. So, and we know as fatigue accelerates, it gets tougher not only to throw punches, so throwing punches meaning making a surge, making a move, trying to create separation in a race, trying to, quote unquote, kick, but it's also going to be harder to take punches and withstand it. That means, someone else employing some type of competitive tactic, right? So you have to be able to receive the punch and also give the punch. And that, I think, has helped me coloring, my preparation of athletes has helped me and the athlete a lot understand the harsh realities that they're stepping into. So I talk a lot about it from a boxing standpoint in that regard, because again, I want there to be absolutely zero confusion about the realities that they're stepping into. And then too, we can then have conversations about what round of the match, quote unquote, what round are you trying to experience today? So like we step on the track, I'm like, all right, guys, today, it's a 5K workout and whatever the design or construct is, The whole goal of the workout though is to get to the end, because here we're going to have a little bit of sparring or a little bit of, and I try to keep that boxing theme top of mind, even in training, because that is the, metaphor and the vehicle I've used, an analogy I've used to kind of help them get in the right mind space there and say, hey, all right, here I want you to throw some big jabs or uppercuts, because again, I'm really trying to get them, a mental shield and a mental posture prepared just as much as I am trying to get these physiological responses ready. So that's, from a mental standpoint, how I approach it. I equate it to being going the full 16 in a boxing match where you're given everything you have until that final bell. What about you, Steve?
Yeah, that's interesting. For me, I focus on a lot of, it depends on the athlete and the level, obviously, but a lot of my rhetoric focuses on being tough in the middle and like dealing with the uncertainty of it all. Mm-hmm. So I take the 5K and I say like, we got to get to 800 to go or a K to go, and if you get there, great, and we'll let the chips fall where they may. So we focus a lot on at the beginning of the year, especially on getting the 4K, right? Mm-hmm. And our motto kind of is if we get to 4K and it's a good day, then we're gonna be there, right? And we're gonna knock it out of the park. But if we don't get to 4K, like, you don't give yourself a shot. So, like, my rhetoric is around putting yourself in position to give a shot. Because I think if you don't go through and you don't accept that, like, it's gonna hurt and you're gonna grind for a while and you gotta get to, like, that end point, then what you have a lot of times that happens is, like, an unintentional lull in there. And with most athletes, I'm trying to eliminate that lull before we worry about, you know, putting the complete package of the race together. Because you know, my opinion is that most people, what happens is we try and put together a full package race, and there's too many things to worry about, right? And we can't put the finishing touches until we're, like, in a position where we can worry about those things. So it's not until people either, you know, maybe get to the NCAAs or, you know, maybe a little bit at the conference championship or, like, get to a point where they're trying to make teams that I'm really, really concerned with, like, the finishing touches, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you got to identify where the real racing begins. And I think, sometimes we, especially at the 5, we try to get too cute too early and say, oh, well, we take it for granted that they're going to get to 4K in the race or 2 laps to go unscathed, right? And that's not the reality at all. If you're running a good, honest 5K, you're gonna get some bumps and bruises and some nicks and cuts, right? You're not gonna be at, you know, 2 laps to go completely just, I'm just walking on clouds. No. So yeah, I mean, first steps first, you got to get to the place where the real racing begins. You got to get there. So many people don't even get there, right? And then once you get there and you see what that reality is like and what the big dogs that you're competing against, whether they're top of the conference, the nation, or the world are doing, then you can go back and start preparing. But I think that's very wise counsel, is you got to get there to where the real racing begins. And that, echoes what I also a lot encourage my athletes too, is we're getting to the place where the real racing starts. There's a nice little prelude, and the prelude and the preface is getting to the point where I say where the players separate themselves. So, we know those thresholds, like halfway in a mile, halfway or 700 or 500 meters into an 800, 3K, 3,200 meters into a 5K. And there you see this where it's a big pack of people and everyone's in contention. Then all of a sudden the field shrinks and is, cut in half by 50% because the players are separating themselves from the people. And I don't call them, sometimes I call them pretenders, but they're not pretending. They're just not ready for the demands of that race at that speed. And to really, really race it, which means throwing in surges, hammering on the pace, tightening the screws, however you want to define it, right? So we know that anytime you step to the line, half the field's not going to make it. The attrition rate's at least 50%. Half the field's not going to make it in most 5Ks to beyond the halfway point as a nice pack if you're going at least reasonable or honest clips. So with that, then what I also like to employ is a lot of, I guess a little bit faster than lactate threshold or, lactate aerobic threshold or LT or, you can call it 5K race pace work. So for me, a lot of 5K prep is actually doing a lot of 3K work. So because again, the 3K and the 5K are very close siblings, but they're definitely different. But I rather people be exposed to the more abrasive and more unruly sibling, which is 3K work, than do a bunch of 5K stuff. So this is my personal principle. I always try to, whatever event an athlete is writing themselves for, I always try to do the bulk of their specific work at one race distance down, so faster than what they're aiming for. So again, if you're running a 10K, you do a lot of 5K work. If you're running a half marathon, then you're doing a lot of 10K work. If you're running a 5, a lot of 3K work. If you're doing a mile, a lot of 800 work, right? Because what my model is, and the framework I'm operating from is saying, let's get them so callous and tolerant of the type of work that is beyond the scope of what is asked of them, so that when they get to where the real racing begins, they have the tools to race. They physiologically, biochemically are ready to do that. So I employ a lot of sub or faster than race pace type work in their preparation cycle, so that it's a familiar territory, a familiar space of like, oh, this is how we're doing it. And one of the key tools I use is, what's called new interval training, or some people call it Russian interval training, which is this idea of, running at that specific speed and then taking an incomplete recovery that's very short, what's called a roll-on, or some might call a float. So a classic example is, 6 times 400 meters at 3K pace with a 100-meter float, or I call it, the correct terminology is roll-on, or the 100-meter roll-on at a kind of like half marathon type pace. So, and sometimes I'm a little kinder and I go marathon type pace. So like for a male, or a national class male who's trying to run, at, let's say in college, 14 flat for the 5K, right? That's about 68, 67 per quarter. What that's going to look like when you break it down is 2 to 3 sets. So 9K worth of work of 400 meters with the 100-meter roll-on. You count the 100-meter roll-on as actual work. It's just, again, it's kind of like an on-track fartlek. You're playing with this nuance, but it's very disciplined on-track fartlek. Or you're going at, say, 64, 65 per lap, and then you go 100-meter roll-on at, 6-minute pace, 22 seconds or something. So very incomplete recovery. That I found, what it does is it encourages, the athlete to experience what it's like to tiptoe that red line with acidosis and lactic buffering right there. And then, they get a little mental reprieve of 100 meters of like, oh, okay, whew, all right, gotta get ready for the next round, right? Going with my boxing theme. And then they can just focus on one lap at a time. And two, the reason I like employing that type of session, it's one of my go-tos for 5K runners, is it allows them to focus on one lap at a time, because you get this 100-meter reprieve where you still gotta go. You're not jogging. It's not a rest. We don't call it rest or recovery. It's a roll-on. It's still work. Don't get me wrong. It's just less abrasive work for 100 meters. And so you do a couple sets of that. That exposes the athlete in real time to not only the biochemical demands and physiological demands, but also the psychological demands, and gives them tools and practicing tools to focus one lap at a time, to grit their teeth to get through. Okay, I have 3 more laps to go on this roll-on workout. I'm on the 3rd set. Man, I'm really feeling the impact of acidosis and lack of lactic buffering right now. But okay, just one lap at a time, and that's my encouragement. Like, hey, you can do anything for 90 seconds. You can do anything for 60 seconds, however long the interval is. And remind them, don't think, just do it. Just go, don't think. And then that's the encouragement that's discussed or, yelled at them as they take that 100-meter roll-on, where it's like, okay, like, whew, let's get ready.
Yeah, I like doing a lot of stuff. I use different terminology like that, but we'll do stuff with floats. A lot of times, I use this for 5K and 10K, where we'll start off with maybe running something like, 6 miles with 600 of it on and 1,000 meters of it float, and then like slowly progress that to where it's like 6 miles of like 1,200 meters on with a 400 float. And that might be for like 10K style, like 1,200 at 10K effort, or a little faster, 400 float off. And it's a great way, like when you take incomplete recoveries like that, or recoveries where they have to stay focused, it's a great way to simulate staying engaged the whole time, without having them have like rest periods where they can like check out for a minute or two in between stuff. It's also why I like to always start my 5K cycles almost always with like 400s with like 30-40 second break. So if you do like, sets of, I don't know, 5 or 6 400s with 30 to 40 seconds break, you can get down near like 5K speed, which is pretty damn fast. But 30-40 seconds isn't enough time to turn your brain off. So it's a great way to get a little bit of that work in without starting with something like K's at that pace. But it makes it where they mentally can't check out. So
yeah, and that's the key thing, I think, is creating sessions. And you can only do, again, these are abrasive, very potent, high tolerant sessions. In a 5K buildup for me, I only do one every 10 days. And sometimes a race is that session, right? Like if you're going to run a 3K, like let's say you're getting ready for Stanford, 5K, you're NCAA college coach and athlete, and see at the end of March, beginning of April. Well, your indoor conference 3K or, your 3K, your fast invite 3K, about 2 months out, right, or 6 weeks out, that's a session for the 5. You can treat it like that. You can use that as a learning tool in your early preparation for that hot 5K that's coming down the pipeline. So, don't forget too, I think sometimes we think, oh, we got to do all this 5K specific work, weekly or twice a week. That's a recipe for burnout as well, because again, the potency of this work is so high that you need to create the space for the athlete to, respond and adapt to the stimulus that you're subjecting it to.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's you're playing with fire a little bit,
Yeah, it really is.
So, that's why I'm with you. I do my specific work at most once every 10 days. Because you're playing with fire whenever you're doing that stuff. And the funny thing is you can get away with doing faster, shorter stuff as long as it's a little bit more controlled. But the 5K stuff is so, I don't know, it's demanding, but it's also you can accumulate a large volume of it, right? Mm-hmm. And that's where you get into problems, because I can get greedy and dictate 5 miles worth of work at 5K pace if I want to, and they'll probably be able to do it, but it's so much work that's so pretty fast that it can really dig you in a hole. And that's why a lot of times I like using cut down stuff where we start a little bit easier so that I have a little bit more room to play with and I can still get high volumes and we'll finish a little bit faster. So if we're doing mile repeats, for example, so if Brian was doing mile repeats and we decided to do 4 to 5 of them, we might start at 10K type effort where he's running 435 to 440 the first one, and by the last one he's running sub 420 or something like that, where it's really cranking, but he got 1 or 2 reps to kind of ease him into getting near that effort. And when doing it like that, I think it's almost like a little bit of a safety net where you can get the volume in and get down to the speed component that you want, but without playing with fire the whole time.
Yeah, it's almost, sometimes I think of it, it's like cutting yourself. It's you want to cut, the athlete wants to cut themselves enough to bleed, but not sever an artery. And it's a masochistic event in nature, right? And even training for it, you have to be a little bit of a masochist. So I use that framework and that reminder, same as you, not to overdo it. Because my tendency is to want to say, oh, let's do 5 mile at 5K effort with 400 meter recovery in 2 minutes, or the classic 5K work, right? Workout is 8 times a K, at 5K 3K pace with 1-to-1 work to rest ratio, right? That's a just good standard Daniels approved workout, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's awesome, it's solid, but it's tough. And for me, you need to save that reserve, right? You need to save that kind of that mental, emotional reserve for race day. So it's a hard balance, because you're trying to build up this capacity, but also not trying to waste that mental, emotional reserve in workout, because you can pour it in a workout, and then they physiologically, but they emotionally are bankrupt on race day because they've been going to the well emotionally and psychologically in all these workouts to hit these tough sessions and nail it in the park and hit homers in practice, but then they get to the race and they strike out. So what I try to do is I always, use the keep it simple, stupid rule, which is but also applying that with be smart. So it's like keep it simple, stupid, and be smart, which means back off a little bit. So if I want to do 5 times a mile, I actually do 5 times 1200. Or if I want to do, Ks, then I might do breakdown Ks or where I package it is like 3 by K and then 5, 3, 2, sets of that, right? Because again, I want them to get there and I want them to experience the harsh realities and demands of that event, but be able to come out, having to go to well a little bit, but just drink a couple cups, not empty it.
So,
and that's, I think, the hardest part.
Yeah, and I think that's where it's like, as a coach, you got to figure out where that line is and like when you want to push it, right? So I intentionally, when I set up training, I intentionally have one session where I'm like, all right, this one we're going to like go to the well, go see God, test ourselves out a little bit and see what's there, right? But you can't set every specific workout up like that. And I think a lot of times what happens is people get in this like mathematical worldview where, let's say they've decided that K repeats is their 5K specific work, then every time they do K repeats, they want to get a little bit faster, right? And if you do that, right, what happens is you ride yourself into this well way too often and you have nowhere to go, right? So I think it's really important when you're setting up training is setting it up where you say, all right, like roughly when do I really want to see what's there and like really push them in practice and make this a key session. And when am I trying to get like the bang for the buck, but maybe go 90% of the way, right? Put them in a place and you're like playing with the training where you put them in a place and then like take them out of that place, right? And it's controlled to a degree, tolerance, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I tell people like for those abrasive sessions, like, man, I want to see your butt spink red. Like you're gonna get after it, you're gonna get your butt spinked red today. But the promise is the next session is super easy, super just, relaxing. So, if you're gonna say do K repeats or mile repeats or, some type of a package of really stout 5K, 3K specific work, your next workout is like, 2-3 sets of 4 to 6 times 200, with 200 easy in between jog, like at, mile pace. Like it's not an impressive session on the paper. Like, oh man, I got this awesome, 4 mile cut down workout and on Tuesday, and then on Friday or Saturday, it's like, coach, that's it? Just, 12 200s packaged in 4 apiece? Go, yep, that's it. Because, I think we talk about the work done on the day, but then we also have to think about the tax, the recovery tax that is, that you have to appease and be, respectful of. Because if you don't, you start digging yourself that hole. And that's, again, you want to go to the well, early and often in training. I believe in that. But I think you have to be specific. When you go to the well, it's taking a cup or two out of it, not emptying it. And, I think a lot of times when people say they went to the well, they emptied the well. They emptied all the reserve they had. No, you need to know how to access and how to use that fuel. And you need to know how to quickly go there and get everything you have out of yourself in reserve, but not take it all out. And the whole promise of the well is, right, slowly but surely it will fill back up if you give it time and space. And that, to me, I think early on coaching the 5K was a big error of mine, was thinking we could just keep linearly progressing this work throughout a training cycle, throughout 6 weeks or 8 weeks, and we could just, all right, every 2 weeks the Ks or miles get faster, or the quarters get faster, or however you do it, without creating that buffer of a nice easy session right afterwards. Like, because if you're asking people to, put on this armor, this mental and emotional armor to like knock out this very stout body of work, on one day, that's going to take at least a week for them to, rebound from. And oh dear, do not do that before a race. Like, it reminds me, like, if you're going to do a really intense, honest 5K session, you need a minimum 10 days, minimum, before your next race. Just because, again, the emotional taxation is pretty high. And I think the longer I've coached, the more I've respected that tax, even though that physiologically they might be rip-roaring ready to go after 4 days because they've, quote unquote, recovered. But we know adaptation and that response time is a minimum 10 days, if not up to 28 days. And I sometimes I even remind athletes to this day, like, oh, I got to work out, coach. I got this race coming up, it's in, 8 days, or it's, oh, man, I just want a workout that's going to get me ready. Oh, you're cooked. You're ready for that race. We can't get you better. We can only get you worse for that race. I'm more worried about this race 3 months from now. That's when we still have influence on. That's when you can still have, enhance or decline your capacity. But as far as this race, 8 days out, you got what you got. And all we can do is, be foolish and deteriorate that by doing too intense or too voluminous or too high quality of work.
It's the insecurity to prove yourself, right?
Right.
You gotta when the work is in there and done, you just gotta accept it, right? You gotta say, here's where I'm at. Like, let's prove it in a race and see if it shows up. But the insecurity of it is like proving yourself all the way up until the last minute, right? Because you think, oh, I'm not ready. I need this, and this, and this. Well, you might need that, like, over the long haul, but it's not going to make a damn bit of difference for this race coming up. And I think,
right,
the longer I coach, the more I look at that emotional component and how emotionally draining things were, because I think that's different than how physically demanding they are. And I think that notion as a coach is something you have to understand and figure out, right? It's right. reading your athlete, seeing how they respond, seeing, where they are emotionally, and like how much emotional energy did they have to use to get through a workout. Because sometimes they use a lot of emotional energy when you don't think so. Maybe if they're coming off breaking up with their girlfriend or boyfriend, or coming
off finals or midterms or a big paper.
Yeah. Exactly. And they're draining that emotional bank just to get through something that isn't that demanding. Right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's very attentive work. Doing 5K preparation work, like 5K specific work, you have to be hyper attentive as a coach. Put the phone down, turn off all social media, do not get distracted, because you as a coach, your eye needs to be, keenly fixed on that athlete as they go throughout the session, and then too ready to have feedback and dialogue about how they're experiencing that session. And that's again where asking questions like, how was that for you? What were you thinking on that rep? Walk me through it, because as a coach, you're trying to get as much information out of that athlete during the callousing 5K session, because that can help you better color how you prepare them now down the road for following sessions, and then also that target 5K race. But I always, for a 5K session, I put the phone away. I put it in, I don't even give myself the opportunity to be distracted. I put it in my backpack and on the other side of the track, and it's just me and the athlete and my stopwatch. And I'm just, keenly fixed on what they're expressing on that day, because I need to take all that in, because I know what mountaintop we're trying to send them to, and they need my full attention. And if you don't give them your full attention, if you're all over the place trying to figure out, oh, we got to, fix travel, or we got this recruit in or something. No. Don't schedule anything for that else to, distract you as a coach on that day of those honest, intense, very potent 5K workout sessions for your athlete. Be fully present with them.
Yeah, I think that's really important, because it is a fine line that you're running through. And I think, going back to the other point that you made that I think is important is a lot of times we see workouts and run as hard, easy, right? There's an extreme dichotomy, and you need to start seeing the various shades in between, right? So that 200 session, we'd call that a very easy, a moderate rhythm session, where you're just trying to get some, rhythm work in, and it's not too demanding physically or mentally, but it's something, right? And you have shades of, moderately hard or under control hard or whatever it is your terminology. But I think it helps as a coach when you start seeing workouts in those shades versus just like, oh, this is a hard day, we need to go hard.
Right. Yeah.
Because it matters, right? So we're getting up past an hour here, but one thing I thought...
Oh, it flew by. Man, that was fun. That just flew by. Yeah.
It did. One thing that I thought would be pretty cool to share is I just pulled up Natosha Rogers' training from the week before, or the 2 weeks before she ran 15:08 in the 5K, and just roll through it. If that makes sense. Just kind of give.
Yeah, no, I was there. I saw it. I was there in person playing proxy coach. It was the best 5K I ever proxy coached in my life. So thank you, Steve.
I know. Good job, John. Way to go.
Yes, as I told him over text, I was like, Natosha crushed it. I take full credit. That was awesome. The only other 5K I ever saw where I was equally inspired was when Tara Welling, set her 5K PR at the Stumptown Twilight Meet, taking full control of the race after the pacer dropped after a mile and just shepherding that field to a bunch of women running sub 5:30 on a rainy summer day in the Pacific Northwest, like not your normal rain, like torrential downpour rain. But yeah, that 5K was awesome. So I'm just going to shut up and listen to you speak because I want to know.
All right, so let's go. So you guys get exclusive look. Look, here we go. Training. All right. This was May 2017. So 15 days out. We'll start there and then go in towards it. 15 days out. 4 by 472 seconds with 60 seconds rest. 3 minutes rest after that. 1 mile and 5:10. 3 minutes rest. 5 200s and 34:35. That is not that hard, folks. Okay? So you sit there and you think, all right, a couple 4s, a mile, a couple 2s. It's kind of a disguised moderate rhythm session, right? So nothing crazy. 2 easy recovery days, and then that Saturday, so now we're at 12 days out. Pretty dang hard specific session, okay? So 2 by mile, these times are at altitude. 2 by mile, 5 minutes, 4:56, 3 minutes rest. 4 by 800, cutting down from 227 down to 221. So, nice.
Whew, spicy.
Hard workout. Okay. 2 easy days. Then what do we do? Tuesday, which is 9 days out. 5 mile tempo, under control and smooth. Start at 5:40, ended at 5:25. So, nice aerobic, not a pressing tempo for her, just something that's good, solid. 2 more easy days, and then we go 6 days out. This is a John workout. 15 by 200 with 200 jog, 36 to 34. So again, what is that? Not that hard, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
So if you notice here, just an interlude, we had our last big hard session 12 days out. And then it was kind of a maintenance aerobic session 9 days out. Why? Because we're in May and she was training for 10Ks and 5Ks and we needed to get work in. But that tempo run wasn't for Oxy, right? The tempo run was for, race a month down the line, right? Then you come back. We're within a week. We go to rhythm. We go 2 easy days, and then the last workout, which was 3 days out from Oxy, was a very simple, very easy 7 by 1 minute on, 1 minute off at 10K effort. Okay?
Yeah, that's what I call the don't F up workout. Like you're fit, you're ready to go. Oh, let's just do something so we don't mess you up workout.
That is the do something workout.
Yeah, do something, but don't do too much because we don't want to make you tired. If you leave this workout more tired for the effort, we screwed up because you got a big race coming up. Yeah,
exactly. So there you go. That's the training going into it. And I think what you see, I think what you see is again, there's a lot of moderate stuff in there, and there's a lot of like maintenance stuff in there, surrounding of a pretty damn hard, pressing workout at altitude.
Yeah,
And
well, I think what my takeaway was, again, we're talking 2 weeks out before,
yep,
one of the best 5Ks, at fields every year consistently on
yep.
U.S. soil at Oxy. And she's a national class, budding world class athlete. I mean, Natosha's good. National champion in the half marathon, national champion in the 10K in college. Like, she only did one hard session, in a 2 weeks period. And, again, I'm sure when you look back at her body of work that season, and her body of work was very methodical and consistent. And I know we've talked about before, she had some ups and downs in the indoor season racing. And I think you've even posted a couple, workout of the days or session or blogs about how you guys managed that disappointing indoor campaign to rebound her for the amazing outdoor 2017 spring calendar racing she had. But here we are 2 weeks out, and Natosha arguably is one of the best distance runners at that time in the U.S. She does one hard session. That's it. And I think sometimes we have to remember, like, that's all it takes. And that one hard session, because it's 15 days or 12 days out, that gave her, and she's mega fit. She's mega fit at this time.
Yep.
But 12 days out is probably the bare minimum time that she could absorb the stimulus from that workout, respond to it, and get a positive adaptation. And that, I think we have to remember, in every coach has to remember, like, that's all it takes is we're just slowly drip by drip trying to get this positive adaptation. And thinking you have to do anything to prove you're ready. Oh, I got to prove. That's foolhardy, because you end up sabotaging the athlete's race and ability to compete rather than enhancing it, as was the, impetus to prove you're ready for this 5K coming up in a week, in 5 days. I mean, and the biggest takeaway is, like, I haven't seen this, Natosha's training plan yet for this time period, and just that 1 minute off, very light session is something exactly I would do too, where you just don't mess up. We're ready to go. All we can do is screw you up. And that's my mentality going into any race about a week out. Like, if it's a big race, conference race, national championship, big time trial race, we got to hit this international mark or whatever, it's like I go into don't screw them up mode. What do I want to do? We'll just screw it up. And I mean, it really is true, because all you can do in that final week before that big race is do work that's going to have an adverse impact physiologically and mentally rather than a positive impact. And your best rule of thumb is just keep it really light and simple like that, so they feel awesome. I want people to be like, Coach, I feel great. I'm excited. Oh, I'm ready, because the hard work's done. If the hard work has been done for months and months before, then you have the privilege to have these light and fluffy sessions about a week out and be excited. But, again, the body of work counts here. It matters.
You got to put in the body of work to get to that point. I think is important. And I think, when you look at race week stuff, as I look at it, is how little can I get away where they still feel like they're doing something and their legs still feel like they're, putting in a little work. Mm-hmm. It's like, that's how it is, and it differs for every single individual and person, right? Marathoners, for example, a lot of times going into work, you have to fake your way through a little bit longer stuff that isn't that hard,
right?
Because they're used to doing such long sessions. So it's like, what can you do to set them up without screwing them up?
Mm-hmm. And sometimes too, you're not privileged to run 1, 2, 3, 5Ks in a season. Like,
Yep.
Like when I was coaching junior college, like some of these athletes had to run 4 to 6 5Ks because you have to run a time to get into the next meet, to get in the next meet, to get in the next meet down the road, right? And so 5Ks are also just 5K races are also very good 5K training. Like, you start off in the early season, you run this first 5K. You always want to buffer about a week or two if you can, but sometimes I get calendars don't. I mean, I've personally had athletes that had to run a 5K for varying reasons every week, or 3 out of 4 weeks in a month, right? Just because if you manipulate it correctly and have the correct approach, it is the best specific training possible, but you have to then go into those types of sessions. And that's just the realities of coaching is, hey, we need you to get this conference or, regional qualifying mark. Okay, but in order to get into that race where you can get that mark with that big pack and race them, you have to get the qualifying mark to get into that race, and so on and so forth, right? So again, don't be shy or bashful if it's like, oh man, I have to, this person's quote unquote not ready to run a 5K. No, sometimes pick your target 5K, whatever that may be down the road, national conference championship 5K, etc. And then use all the 5Ks that you have in your racing calendar as, one, as racing exercises and experiences where you can learn a lot, but two, also as training activities. Again, I'm not a fan of telling athletes this race is a quote unquote workout, but view that in your construct of the season of your mind of saying, hey, this workout or this race has workout tendencies and natures. How do I have the athlete approach it from a racing standpoint so we get the psycho-emotional, physiological impacts we want to prepare them for the target 5K at the end of the season? Because I just don't want people listening to this episode of the podcast and be like, oh, I better just shut it down in training and not race for 5 weeks, or, be really cautious and, like, no, that's not the reality of the racing world we live in as coaches and athletes. But I think with intelligent design and, organization and planning ahead of time and really being very, very clear about what your target is, you can, use the racing calendar and multiple 5Ks in a season to your and your athlete's advantage.
I think that is a brilliant place to end. So,
and that's all we got. That's everything. Everything on the 5K.
Everything from training to racing to how demanding it is. That is everything we know about the 5K, so don't ask us anything else about the 5K.
I'm sure we'll revisit it a lot. I mean, it's a very complex event. Like all are on the track when you really get into the nuance of it. So, but hopefully that helps. And if you do have questions, Steve might not answer, but I will. So email me at jmarcus.hpw@gmail.com or shoot me a direct message on Twitter. I'm happy to reply. It might take me about a week to get back to your question. I try to get back to everyone's inquiries within a week. And some of them are, like I said, they're good. They're great questions. I mean, shout out to Joan Hunter, Drew Hunter's mother, and also coach of the Nike Cross National Championship men's team this past season. She sent me like a lot of great questions. I'm like, oh man, this is awesome. And I've actually been trying to get on the phone with her just because there's so much to unpack. But it goes to show you, like, she's one of the best high school coaches right now in the country. And she still has this inquisitive mind, asking simpletons like Steve and I our opinions on things. So that's the goal, right? That's the whole point of the podcast for now going on 4 years, or Steve and I putting ourselves out there, and the new High Performance West, is to say, hey, this is a place and a culture of exchange. And if we connect, we'll all learn and grow and get better. So thank you for the privilege of the last several years. And I'm also excited to continue interacting, engaging, exchanging, at the new High Performance West, and also too with all the fun workshops that we're doing coming down the pipeline in 2018. We're going to have more. We got our first one coming up shortly here in Seattle on the 12th with our good friend and coaching colleague Danny Mackey. He and I will be doing one in Seattle, but Steve and I have plans to do more in person and online, either separate with a co-host or together sometimes if the locale and timing works out.
Yep. So keep telling us what you want, and we'll keep trying to deliver.
That's what we do. We just give the people what they want. Here's to a great 2018, everybody. Thank you.